Again, everyone! Welcome back to another segment of Dragon Videos where we go through certain lists and theories. I know some of you have been waiting for quite a while for a different change in material, and I have been trying to be productive with that, but there have been a lot of busy stuff going on. But here's my latest list. Top 10 Saddest Cartoon Songs. We've always had come across songs where we really feel bad for the cartoon characters that reside in them. It usually depends on the situation, and when written well as having a good amount of timing, it definitely helps bring out more of a character and pushes the story forward. For this list, I'm going to focus on those songs that are really sad and tear-jerking, as well as giving emotional drive. Be warned, there will be spoilers in this, so if you are familiar with these shows, or if you're not, please watch them. Just get ready for what may come next. Without further ado, let's begin. Say that breaking up is hard to do, especially when it comes to cartoon couples. Even with the really loved ones, it is very heartbreaking. Anyway, we have Fred and Daphne. They have a very interesting relationship in the early Scooby-Doo. It's not a flat-out romance, but whenever the gang is separating to solve a mystery, Daphne and Fred would always be together. And it becomes more canon in Mystery Incorporated, where Fred and the gang become a little bit more closer and have more drama going on, especially when Fred and Daphne's relationship is explored and becomes more canon. Before that, they had to deal with the Hex Girls being sabotaged by a phantom. Unfortunately, during the case and one of Daphne's kidnappings, Fred found himself wishing he could just forget her. Unbeknownst to him that Daphne heard nearly the whole thing, and resulting in what seemed to be somewhat of a breakup, and Daphne was trying to get rid of her emotional blues. So, following Thorne's advice, she wrote a song called Trap of Love, where she was expressing her frustration over Fred's obsession with his traps and his desires to leave her out of that picture. And even though the two of them made up later on in the series, it still didn't change the fact of how heartbreaking that song was. I mean, those two definitely have a very interesting relationship. Fred really does care about Daphne, but his lust for traps can sometimes cloud his judgment over her, so it definitely is understandable of why that Daphne would sometimes want to break up with a man. Tiara. Oh boy, is she a piece of work. Even in the MLP fandom and in the show Friendship is Magic, I can still remember of how much of a pistol she was, bullying Apple Bloom and her friends constantly, non-stop. That brat was practically the bane of everyone's existence, even in the fandom. It was getting up to the point where we would groan every time she would show up on the screen. Well, that's what most people did until this episode, where basically when Dharma and Tiara lost for an election, and with the disapproval of her mother, it definitely felt like we were singing a different tune towards her. And of course, this is definitely where we learn more about Tiara's character. When she's less of a bully, you definitely learn that she's under a lot of pressure, coming from a privileged family and wants nothing more than to make them proud. But at the same time, she wants to make sense of her cutie mark and what she's capable of in the world. And she's struggling with that because she's, again, under so much emotional pressure, and she doesn't know how to express it in a very healthy way. It's definitely up to this point where this is one of those sad cartoon songs where you feel bad for the villains or the pettier ones because of the situation they are in. Just a fine example about how to write a certain bully that you can sympathize with, as well as earning some forgiveness. And in time, Diamond Tiara did, but I felt like with the pony I want to be, it definitely helped reflect this character in a more positive light than we had in previous episodes that featured her. But there are more sadder songs to come. Well, we all knew that Mother Gothel was a terrible mom to Rapunzel, but she definitely takes an all-new level of horrible mom when this happens. We soon learn the truth about Cassandra's past, who she was before she met Rapunzel, and their friendship. Apparently, in Waiting in the Wings, this is basically Cassandra dealing with what she's got in her life. She's basically a female warrior of her time, nothing more than trying to fight off and protecting Rapunzel whenever possible. While Rapunzel's happy and cheery, Cassandra's sometimes a bit gloomy and always has the worst luck in the entire series, especially when she learns the truth behind Mother Gothel and her connection with Rapunzel. She always seems to be outshined by Rapunzel a lot, even ignored or passed off. No matter what she wants out of life, she'll never get it. And thus that's why she's always waiting in the wings, as the title says itself. She wants nothing more than to be noticed, which I feel like is a song that a lot of people can relate to. And it definitely makes it sad when we see Cassandra being pushed aside, even though she shows she's a very capable character in combat as well as a good friend to Rapunzel. So yeah, that's really bites. I will probably say a million times about this before I die, but whenever we always see Amethyst, we'd always associate with the title Wild Child toward her. Having no sense of rules, always going off the deep end whenever possible, well before she matured later on in the series, but she definitely was very bold in what she was doing. Well, that was until she had her issues. In Cry for Help, Garnet discouraged Amethyst from forming Sugalite, mostly because after the events of Coach Stephen nearly got them all killed, and thus it had to be Sardonyx to step into the plate and having to take down the tower that was affecting old TV stuff as well as just communicating with Homeworld. Discouraged by this, Amethyst shows her more vulnerable side in this song, Tower of Mistakes. She's frustrated by the situation that she's shoved into her face, always pushed aside and never acknowledged, feeling pretty much alone. It doesn't exactly help that she was born from something horrible like the Alpha Kindergarten, and of course the fact that she feels like she's just failing Garnet and the rest of the team. And it does make you feel really bad for Amethyst. Even though she can be a little out of control at times, it's mostly just her having to deal with the fact that she just can't always control certain things. And no matter how she tried, she may not always be the best for the team. Question for some of you. Had you ever done a mistake that was so bad you didn't know how to fix it? Well, this is a case for Twilight Sparkle, and I believe it was the episode The Best Day Ever. What happened was, Twilight has a tendency to be very eager to learn things and learn about magic, but she can get over her head sometimes. In this case, she came across a spell from a favorite character called Starbeard Star Swirl the Bearded, and this spell accidentally triggered a switcheroo amongst her friends, each of them having opposite jobs, and whoops, that resulted into some major chaos for Ponyville and some very unhappy ponies. Feeling bad for what she did, Twilight finds herself sitting in the crowd and having to deal with the consequences that came with it. Basically, when she says, I have to find a way to make it all okay, this is definitely where she's having a hard time processing what she has to do in order to fix her mistake. And the worst part is, there's no counterspell for the Star Swirl the Bearded's spell. This ultimately resulted in, again, some major chaos. Rainbow Dash is stuck doing Fluttershy's job, trying to figure out how to get all the animals to settle down and listen to her, as well as for poor Rarity, who is now struggling to control weather and has disapproval amongst the ponies. This is basically, with the piano works and the visuals, it definitely creates a very devastating song, giving the depth of the consequences of Twilight's actions. Even though it wasn't pure malice and she wasn't trying to hurt anyone, Twilight does feel bad for setting up her friends in a very difficult position, and thus making it very difficult to fix a huge problem. Even though she was able to fix it in the end, it does feel like it was one of those situations where not every problem can be fixed that easy, and sometimes there's never a solution to that problem. Now, I know I've probably beaten this subject to death a lot, but I'll probably just have to throw it in anyways considering the tone of this song. Lapis is basically a tragic character, even though she has a tendency to be abusive, especially after what had happened with her time with Jasper, and of course being stuck in a mirror for all eternity. However, with the song On Your Distant Shore, it definitely represents more about Lapis's struggles of whether or not she should come back to Earth or deal with the consequences that come with it. Of course, it would mean having to face the diamonds and their tyranny. And yeah, even though it doesn't justify some of the stuff that she did, as well as I'm not going to ignore the fact that Steven Universe crew may not have had given her a chance to have proper writing, but of course we can blame Cartoon Network for that. It still is really a sad song. Lapis has been lonely for years, and she has a wonderful opportunity to actually have a relationship with the other gems and become a crystal gem herself. However, she's always shying away from the whole concept and running away from her problems whatever chance she gets. I know that it's a very difficult thing to take on, and sometimes she's hard to sympathize with, but On Your Distant Shore definitely highlights more of Lapis' psyche and what she has to deal with. She's been through a lot of emotional trauma, and she doesn't know what to do from there on. And from what we saw about the diamonds, she has every right to fear them. And it definitely just shows that sometimes there are just some people that are in a lot of pain, and sometimes the options are a little difficult to go through. Like Lapis Lazuli, Pearl can definitely be a love and hate sort of thing. Earlier in the season, she definitely comes off a little hateable because she's always so predictive of Steven, always getting on everyone's nerves, being commanding, as well as pushing her own agenda whenever possible. It can be a bit frustrating, and I do agree, sometimes it makes Pearl a little unlikable. Even her obsession with Rose definitely puts everything questionable. However, when you get to the song It's Over, Isn't It? From the episode Mr. Greg, you do feel a genuine sadness she has for Rose Quartz, a relationship that goes beyond deeper than we ever knew. And Pearl feels frustrated and upset that she was pushed aside for Greg because she was very faithful to Rose after all this time. And nothing will ever bring Rose back. She's dealing with this loss, and Steven's the closest thing Pearl has to the connected woman that she loved. And of course, so it would make sense of why she's always with Steven and probably overprotective. It's practically the last piece of a woman she loves. But not only that, but what makes the song sadder even now is when you learn about the Rose Quartz plot twist in A Single Pale Rose. If you think about it, that definitely makes It's Over, Isn't It? A bit of a sadder song. Because it's this loss and struggle for Pearl, dealing with the fact that she'll never see Rose again, the one person that made her feel special. Even if it seems a bit messed up, Pearl has to deal with it. Even when she says, "It's over, isn't it? Why can't I move on?" It just basically means that despite the war being over, she's psychologically and emotionally unable to move forward. And plus, it's a very relatable song, which is why I put it so further up on the list. Horse is a very complicated character. She is very rough and brash. When you're first introduced to her, you practically see the world as this terrifying and dark, dismal place. And, well, when she winds up in Centaur World, she finds herself at a place, having to deal with the centaurs with their plush and their, silly ways, and it frustrates her to no end, and she just wants nothing more than to return home to her world. But every time she spends a place there, she's worried that she might forget her friend, which is why I put "What if I forget your face?" because it definitely is that sentimental fear about losing the memory of a loved one that is so meaning to us, as well as just showing Horse's fragile state, the acknowledgement she has and that she wants to hide from others, which is pretty normal if you think about of how the world was torn by war and has to make sure to show not any weakness to the enemy because you might die. So as Horse continues on with her journey and starts to take on a centaur form, she develops an identity crisis. She doesn't know what to do with herself, and she's slowly changing up to the point where her mindset thinks, will she recognize me in this cartoony form? Will she even see me as the horse she once knew? Would I be worth anything? It's by then that Horse struggles with who she is, which is also why I put who is she rephrase on this list. It represents Horse's struggle with her identity and the idea that maybe she shouldn't continue going forward because the transformation may make her unrecognizable to her friend and having to deal with the consequences that came with it. Though thankfully she's able to overcome this ordeal with the help of her friends, Wama Wink especially, and was also by then where she certainly loved herself, but still, both of the songs in Centaur World were pretty darn sad and earned a number 2 spot. Now, in the beginning, Flynn Rider wasn't exactly the best person. He had a tendency of being dishonest and was a bit manipulative toward Rapunzel at the beginning of the film. But little by little, he began to grow lovable. And towards the series, when you get to the Tangled series, you start to feel a little bad for him when you learn the truth of who he really is. When Eugene, aka Flynn Rider, learns about where his birthright comes from, he puts everything into question of who he is and what it means for his relationship with Rapunzel, the only person who helped him find an option for his life outside of the loneliness he felt of being a thief. He's still he's struggling with betrayal, the loneliness, and what it really means to be who he is. And even with those struggles, he's not sure of what he wants to do for Rapunzel, especially when it comes to those moon powers that come with it. But in the end, he definitely chose Rapunzel over the powers, and wants nothing more to be with her. But everything I thought I knew still threw a lot of monkey wrenches towards his personality and what it really meant for a character. This really highlighted more of how far he had come with his character development, having to learn who he is and overcoming the trials. But one thing that made everything I thought I knew was practically like dealing with the concept of who you really are, and that everything you once knew was nothing more than a huge lie. While in the previous number 1 spot, it was more about having to deal with change, it was more about identity from the past and learning the truth behind it, which is probably what Eugene had been struggling throughout the majority of a song, especially when he says, who I am. So folks, this is it. This is all I have about the top 10 saddest cartoon songs. If there's any that you think that I left out, please let me know. Do a like, comment, and subscribe. This is Dragon Videos, signing off.